Hello YouTube. Today I wanted to take a look at a different version of Axis and Allies, Axis and Allies 1942 2nd Edition. Now I put up a couple videos about this game quite a few weeks back, so I thought it was time to take a second look at different strategies here. Today we're going to be looking at the German-Soviet front and how the Soviet Union might blunt German advances. It really isn't overly complicated, and I'm not going to talk about individual troop movements or unit purchases on your turn. Rather, I'm going to be looking at the overarching strategy here and what you want to keep in mind. Now, the Soviet Union has one primary thing it needs to focus on, which is this front. It also has the front with Japan to worry about, and potentially, eventually, its southern front down here if Germany happens to break through, or Japan breaks through over here, or maybe both coming up this way. Early on, you're not going to need to worry about that as much. And Japan isn't going to be a huge factor. You might want to transfer some of your troops over here, down south, to bottle them up in Manchuria. In Axis and Allies Revised, I've seen strategies, and I'm a fan of a strategy that moves a couple of these units over into China just to help out there. So those are still on the table, but on the first turn, especially, you're going to want to be focusing on Germany, and that is where most of your attention is going to go for a good portion of the game. So how do you blunt the German offense? Because they are loaded down with tanks and planes, and economically you are no match for them one-on-one. So what you want to do is two things. First one is look to see if there are German tanks and planes that you can easily take out. On your first turn, just as an example, there's a tank over here in this territory that you can easily have enough units from all these different sides to take that out. But you also have a tank and a fighter down here in Ukraine that you can take. You should be able to take out if you move all the guys in Caucasus over, the two fighters, and then make sure that you allocate your tanks appropriately. You should be able to take Ukraine as well. What does this do? Well, it takes out two enemy tanks and a fighter. It means that for the Russian counterattack in this territory here, they only have those three infantry in Belarusia to send in. They can send in a handful of tanks, but they don't have a whole lot of fodder, which means that countering in that strategically important territory is going to be unlikely. Excuse me, I keep clearing my throat. I'm recovering from a cold. I'm hoping that my voice doesn't sound too nasally right now. But in any case, the counter over here in, I believe that's West Russia, let me double check. Yeah, in West Russia is unlikely because Germany can only send in that fodder from Belarusia in there. Now, of course, they're going to attack in Ukraine, and that's fine, because in this case, that leads us to our second point. So we've killed as much offense as we can. We haven't attacked territories that just have infantry, because infantry attack better on defense. Infantry are better on defense than offense, and so we are at a disadvantage if we attack there. But we have taken out the German offense. Now, Germany is inevitably, or almost assuredly, going to counterattack into Ukraine. And that's fine, because what we want to do is, on our second turn, we are going to be looking at where we can effectively counter. And as long as whatever we do on our turn makes an attack on West Russia less likely, we can counterattack effectively all along the front. Because from West Russia we can hit Belarusia, we can also hit Ukraine. In fact, Ukraine, we've got Caucasus in here, so we've got the new units we put here, plus whatever's in West Russia, can consolidate right there and attack Ukraine. Germany's going to be counterattacking, which means they're probably going to have at least a few tanks there. So when they counterattack, then we'll counter their counter and kill more tanks, and that's the kind of exchange we want to have. Now, Up north, if Germany doesn't attack Karelia up here, we have the same situation where we've got new units in Karelia. West Russia can move in on Belarus. So both of their territories are vulnerable. Now, things can get a little bit hairy if Germany does attack Karelia and takes it, because Russia proper here does not border Karelia, unlike in other versions of the game. You've got Archangel in the way, so you can't counter quite as easily by placing new units in Russia and then attacking with Russia and West Russia, but you can still counter with units from West Russia. Now, taking the northern route does leave the Germans more vulnerable to a British counterattack, which is not as probable, at least early in game, down south. And so if the British are able to help out, reinforce Archangel, or start taking Norway, Finland, and then help you take Karelia back, that can really resolve that situation. So your board is going to look a little bit different depending on what Germany does, depending on how dice rolls go. But if you take those two territories, West Russia and Ukraine, on the first turn, Germany is very likely to try and take Ukraine back, and then you have bogged them down in kind of a tit for tat. They're going to send units there with tanks, then you're going to counter with West Russia and Caucasus, while moving the newly placed units in Russia forward to West Russia. And then they're going to counter and take it back, and then you're going to counter and take it back. Eventually, if they're not thoroughly distracted elsewhere, they will overpower you just because of their economic advantage. But if you're able to blunt them for just, 2, 3, maybe 4 turns, then the Allies should be very much in the war, England and the United States, causing all sorts of trouble. Then Germany will have to pull back, and then worst case scenario, you continue to just break even over here. Best case scenario, you're able to start pushing in further. But early in game, your focus should just be on blunting the German advance until England and the US get into the war. And the only way to do that effectively is not, as some people might say, to just build defensively, and because that leaves Germany with the initiative. You want to be in a position where you control West Russia, because it is such a strategically important territory because of how much it borders. And then anywhere that Germany tries to make an advance, you're well positioned to counterattack when you have that territory. And so you always want to be looking for, where did Germany put its tanks? What is it likely to counter with? Because if you can take a territory, let's say you can take back Ukraine by just sending in a couple infantry and your fighters, Germany's going to counterattack, so you might as well keep your tanks in reserve, and then you'll use them maybe the next turn. But if you move them forward needlessly in an attack that's going to be countered, then you're going to lose those tanks when Germany counterattacks. So you want to send in just enough. You can send in as much infantry as you want, as long as it doesn't leave you vulnerable elsewhere. But you want to send in just enough offense to make sure that you can take the territory, and no more than that. And that's something that can take a little bit of experience to gauge. Maybe you want to run a couple scenarios early on through one of those online Axis and Allies odds calculators. But you want to preserve your tanks if at all possible, and your fighters. And so you only want to send enough in that will then have to remain in the territory, as much as you have to. You want to keep the rest of them in reserve. Sorry, that was a little bit more wordy than I would have wanted. But ultimately, that is the goal as the Soviets early in game, is to just capture that strategically important territory and then blunt the German offensive machine for a couple turns while the other allies get into the war. And gradually Germany will have to focus less on you, and then as they do that, you will begin to break even, and then slowly start to have the advantage in this theater over here, and then that's when you start to make your advance. But it's just a one step at a time thing with the Soviet Union, just like it was in the actual war. You're going to take things slow, but you're always going to be looking for those opportunities. Where are Germany's tanks, and can I effectively counter over there and just blunt that force? So that is just an overview of how Russia might blunt the German advance. Hope you enjoyed this video. I plan at this point to make a few more 1942 second edition videos. Like I said, going to swing around, take another look at this game, at different strategies. If you have any thoughts on this strategy or other things you'd like to see in this game, or other versions of Axis and Allies that you would like to see, please let me know in comments, and I hope you enjoyed this video.